Hello, my name is Evelyn, and this is the story of how I fell in love with Alvin. For a long time, I believed my love life had ended the day I turned 64. Not because I had stopped believing in love, but because after so many years of marriage, and a silent grief that never seemed to lift, my heart had quietly accepted that some things belonged to the past. I had been married for 32 years, a lifetime beside a man who made me laugh, cry, dream, and in the end, left me with more memories than longing. When he passed, I didn't cry right away. Grief came slowly, like a thick fog that settles in with no urgency. For the first few months, my days were quiet, filled with warm tea and old photographs. But over time, I found refuge in my own rituals. Every Sunday morning, I'd walk alone through the city park. I'd leave early, before the sun got too warm, put on my headphones, and choose a soft instrumental track. Nothing with lyrics. Words still hurt too much. That was my moment. One step at a time, through trees and fallen leaves, I was trying to reconnect with myself. Sometimes I'd sit on the same old bench, next to a crooked tree that seemed to have aged with me. I'd watch families stroll by, couples holding hands, and though there was a certain emptiness, there was also peace in simply being there, whole, even if alone. It was on one of those quiet mornings that I noticed a new face crossing my path. He always walked in the opposite direction, and at first we only exchanged glances. Then came the smiles, and eventually, a shy good morning. I'd respond with a slight nod, without removing my headphones, not because I wasn't interested, but because I was protecting myself. Still, there was something about his constant presence that stirred my curiosity. He wasn't intrusive. He walked with his hands in his pockets, sometimes wearing a worn baseball cap, and had the air of someone who had watched the world go by without rushing. One of those Sundays, as I returned home, I caught myself smiling for no reason, or maybe the reason had brown eyes and a calm smile. Will he be there next week? I wondered, and I hated myself a little for thinking that, as if my heart, traitorous as ever, was trying to restart something I had already buried. But deep down, something inside me was shifting. I was still a woman. I still had dreams, even if they were hidden. And maybe, just maybe, there was still room for something new, even if I didn't know what that would be. At 64, I realized life doesn't end with someone's absence. It can begin, again with the simple presence of another. I can't say whether it was love or just a breeze of hope, but on that bench, with sunlight filtering through the leaves and soft music in my ears, I knew my story wasn't over. It was simply turning a new page. And for the first time in a long while, I was ready to read what came next. It was another Sunday like many others. The sky was still waking up as I entered the gates of the park. I put in my headphones, picked a gentle melody, and began my walk. I knew every curve of that path, every twisted tree, every weathered bench. But that face was starting to look familiar. He walked in the opposite direction, always with a subtle smile, as if to say, "I see you," without using words. At first we exchanged only brief glances. Then he began greeting me with a gentle good morning, one of those greetings that almost touches your shoulder. I'd nod back, headphones still in, my invisible shield. But I'll admit, something was shifting inside. Me. Curiosity was slowly growing, like a flower pushing through a sidewalk crack. Then, on one particular Sunday, everything changed. Before I tell you what happened that day, take a second to subscribe to this channel and leave your like. This is a true story, emotional, and maybe it will awaken something in you that's been asleep too. I was distracted, watching the leaves beneath my feet, when I felt someone closer than usual. Then, gently, he removed one of my earbuds. My whole body froze for a moment. I looked at him, surprised, but not afraid. There was tenderness in his eyes, not intrusion. "You've noticed we've been in the same place at the same time for over a month now, right?" he said, smiling like it was the most natural thing in the world. I was speechless for a second. My heart jumped like a teenager's, and I felt silly. I let out a quiet laugh and replied, "I hadn't been counting the days, but now that you mention it, you're right. My name's Alvin," he said, extending a firm, calm hand. "I'm 67, and if I may say, you have a very graceful way of walking. It's like you're listening to life." I smiled, blushing like I hadn't in years. I shook his hand. "Evelyn, 64, and thank you. I try to listen, yes. Sometimes life speaks louder when we're quiet inside. He laughed with his eyes. Mind if I join you for a bit? I promise not to talk too much. And so we walked together. Slowly, like people in no rush to arrive anywhere. He told me he had also lost someone years ago, and that walking helped keep his heart moving. We shared memories without pain, only with that gentle recognition between two people who have sailed similar seas. That Sunday, Alvin didn't just walk beside me, he walked into my life. When we said goodbye with a casual, "See you next Sunday," I thought that would be all. A sweet repetition, a new ritual between two strangers who had recognized each other. But on Wednesday, as I sipped my coffee on the porch, I heard my phone buzz. It was a message from him. "Evelyn, I know our meetings have been brief, but would you join me for some tea at my place? I promise the water's already on the stove." I stood there, staring at the screen. I didn't know what to reply. My heart did that silly leap again, and I thought, is it too soon? But too soon for what exactly? What was I afraid of? I took a deep breath and typed, "I accept, but only if you have brown sugar." I arrived at his place in the late afternoon. It was a modest 2-story home, but something about it made me smile right away. Plants everywhere, and a little sign on the door that read, "Enter with kindness." When he opened the door, he was wearing a beige apron with a dish towel over his shoulder. "Don't laugh, this is my welcome uniform," he said, laughing at himself. His living room felt like a hug. Worn but clean pillows, framed quotes that spoke straight to the heart, books stacked messily, and on the table, a tray with 2 hand-painted porcelain cups. "Do you collect mugs?" I asked, charmed. "Ever since my daughter gave me the first one on a trip to the mountains. Now each one tells a story. Want to hear one?" I nodded, and he began to tell me. Each mug held a piece of his life: the bookstore where he met his wife, the one his grandson gave him last Christmas, the one he bought in silence on a sad day just to have a reason to smile. We talked for hours, about the books we loved, the old movies that still moved us, the smells that brought back memories. He listened to me like no one had in a long time, and at the same time, I heard my own voice in a new way, as if it was being reborn with something I hadn't realized still lived inside me. At one point, he looked at me and said, "You know, Evelyn, I don't know what you were expecting to find here, but I hope you felt at home." I smiled. "Alvin, I think I found something even better, a piece of peace inside someone's heart." When I left, he walked me to the gate and said with that same calm smile, "The kettle's staying on the stove, just so you know." I got in my car with tears in my eyes and warmth in my chest, because in that house full of stories, I felt something rare, belonging, and for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel scary. It felt right. I went back to Alvin's house the next Sunday. There was no formal invitation. He just looked at me after our walk and said in that gentle tone, "The kettle's still on, Evelyn." And I replied, "Then, I hope you didn't let the water boil too long." I smiled. He smiled. And off we went, once more. This time he greeted me with a freshly baked apple pie. "Got the recipe from my sister," he said, a little shy. "But last time I used the oven was in the last century, so go easy on me." We laughed. It was all so light, simple, but something was shifting. I could feel it. In the air, in the way he looked at me, as if every one of my gestures said more than I could express in words. After tea, we stayed on the porch. It was late afternoon and the sky was dressed in shades of orange. There was a silence between us, but not an uncomfortable one. It was anticipation. He moved closer, with a tenderness that moved me. He didn't touch me right away. He just stood there, a few inches away, looking out at the horizon. Then, without a word, he leaned in and brushed the curve of my neck softly with his nose. My whole body responded before my mind could understand what was happening. I closed my eyes instinctively and felt a warmth I hadn't known in years. It wasn't just physical. It was like a dammed-up river had finally found a crack. A chill ran down my spine, like it was whispering, "You're still alive." My heart pounded, fast, and for a second I wanted to run. Not from him, but from myself, from what it was awakening, from the fear of feeling again. But I didn't run. I stayed, quiet, feeling. He pulled back just enough to look into my eyes. "Is this okay?" asked softly. Yes. I just didn't expect my body to remember so quickly what it felt like to be touched with tenderness, I answered, almost in a whisper, nearly overwhelmed. He smiled, and his gaze carried something between tenderness and admiration. Evelyn, I'm in no rush, but I needed to know if I could still feel this too. And now I know. I smiled back. There was nothing more to say. My body had already answered for me. In that moment, I realized just how much I had forgotten the woman that still lived inside me. The one who still longed to be desired, touched, discovered. The one who, even after all these years, could still shiver at someone's closeness. It wasn't about sex or some burning passion. It was about presence, about a touch that says, I see you, all of you. When we said goodbye, he just held my hand firmly. There was no kiss, no promises, but my body, my heart, my soul, all of them knew something had awakened. And this time, I wasn't afraid to feel. In the days that followed that touch on my neck, my mind became a maze of thoughts, and my heart, a messy orchestra. I walked through the house like someone trying to remember where they had left something important. Only what I had found wasn't lost outside of me. It had been asleep inside. And now that it was awake, it stared back at me in the mirror each morning asking, are you going to run? Or are you going to live this? For many years, love had been a familiar place. My marriage, though not perfect, was a harbor. The routine, the silent codes, even the disagreements, everything had its place. After the loss, I built walls around my chest. Small habits kept me safe. Afternoon tea, books piled beside my bed, my organized solitude. I wasn't sad. I was safe. But Alvin, with his calm demeanor and eyes that seemed to see through my words, dismantled all of that with a single gesture. And I found myself facing the hardest choice of all, to let someone see me fully again, scars and all, or retreat into the way, quiet I had fought so hard to build. That week, I found myself thinking about my late husband, about how he used to hug me from behind while I washed the dishes, about his scent lingering in the couch cushions, about the day we cried together, in silence, after the diagnosis. I felt guilty for feeling something else now, guilty for smiling to myself at the thought of Alvin's face, as if happiness were betrayal. But at the same time, a soft voice inside me whispered, you deserve another story. One late afternoon, I called my sister and told her everything. Evelyn, she said, loving again isn't betraying the past. It's honoring the life still beating inside you. And that's when I understood. Starting over doesn't mean erasing what was beautiful. It means having the courage to open your heart again, even knowing the risks. It means looking someone in the eyes and saying, here I am, with my fears, my patched up dreams, and this shy little wish to be happy again. That Sunday, before even leaving the house, I stood in front of the mirror for a few minutes. I put on lipstick, something I hadn't done in ages, and whispered to myself, you deserve to feel. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be real. I met Alvin in the park, just like always. He didn't say anything at first, just smiled. And in that smile, there was a quiet, respectful waiting. I touched his hand this time, without hesitation, and said, I'm scared, but I'm here. He squeezed my hand gently. Then we're on the same page. And in that moment, I knew loving again wasn't repeating the past. It was choosing, with awareness and heart, to live something new, and letting life surprise me. Since that Sunday when I held Alvin's hand without hesitation, everything changed. Slowly, but steadily. It was like the seasons of life shifted without me noticing the exact moment when the cold said goodbye and the warmth arrived, gently warming the corners of my house, the silences in my soul, the Sundays of my life. Our meetings became part of my routine with such sweet naturalness that it felt like they had always been there, waiting for me. He no longer needed to send messages. I just knew that, at the end of the walk, he would be there, sometimes with a mug in his hand, other times, just with that smile that made me forget time even existed. Alvin wasn't about grand gestures. He was about details. One day, he brought me an umbrella and said, I know you like feeling the rain on your face, but this one's just to shield you from what isn't poetry. I laughed, held the polished wooden handle, and felt a tenderness I hadn't known in years. We started sharing more than tea and pies. We shared silence, and what a beautiful silence it was. Not the empty kind I knew so well, but one full of presence. Sometimes he'd read a passage aloud from a book. Other times I'd bring my crochet, and we'd just sit there, side by side, saying nothing for entire minutes. But I never felt alone. It was as if his simple presence was enough. Little by little, our routines became rituals. He'd wait with the kettle already on the stove, and I'd bring a new kind of tea. Hibiscus, chamomile, mint, We even started naming our blends. This one, Alvin, is the tea of new beginnings. And he'd reply, then it deserves to be sipped slowly. We walked through the park hand in hand, sometimes talking about our children, our grandchildren, other times just listening to the birds. Time felt kinder next to him, as if the clock's hands bent to our rhythm. One of those Sundays, sitting on the same bench beside the old crooked tree, Alvin said, "You know this place used to just be a backdrop before you came, right? Now it has a story." I looked at him, held his hand, and replied, "And I used to be just a character repeating old lines. With you, I've learned I can write new ones. What we built didn't come from impulse. It came from care, from gentleness, from the daily choice to show up." I discovered that love, after 60, is calmer, more mature, but no less moving. It's a love that knows how to wait, but also how to surprise. And in that comfortable silence beside him, between a sip of tea and a soft touch on my fingers, I realized I didn't need promises or grand declarations. I already had everything I'd been looking for, a place to be who I am, and someone who, just by being beside me, made me feel that this was where I belonged. If I could sit with you now, looking you in the eyes, with the calm that only the years can bring, I'd say this: never close the door to love, not even after 70, not even after the pain, the loss, the solitude that seems like it came to stay. Because love, oh, love, has a way of knocking that's all its own. And sometimes it doesn't even knock. It slips in through the window, through the scent of tea, through the touch of a hand that has no urgency. I didn't plan any of this. When I lost my husband, I thought that was the final love story of my life. And for a time, it was. Because my grief deserved to be lived, just like the love we had deserved to be honored. But life, oh, life, it keeps finding little openings in us. And if we don't shut everything tight, it finds a way in. And sometimes, it brings someone with it. With Alvin, everything was different. It was slow, gentle, quiet, but full of meaning. And I learned that mature love doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. It doesn't need urgency. It's content simply to be, to exist in the in-between. It's more presence than promise, more glance than word, more truth than expectation. You know, I used to think loving again would be like repeating an old recipe, but it's not. Loving after 60 or 70 is like cooking with what you have left in the pantry, with the ingredients life gave you, with the spices you've learned to treasure, and still making something new, something that's entirely yours. Today, when I wake up and look to my side, I don't see a fairy tale. I see a partner who knows how to make my tea just the way I like it, who understands when I need silence, who holds my hand firmly when we cross the street, not because I need it, but because he wants to be there. I see someone who knows my wrinkles, but is still curious about the stories they tell. If I can leave you with anything, it's this: love doesn't have an expiration date. It doesn't ask for youth. It asks for openness. It doesn't demand a perfect body, just a heart that still beats with hope. And if at some point you ask yourself, is it too late? Know that time is exactly what love respects the most. It waits for those who choose to open the door again. So if loneliness knocks, offer it tea. If longing visits, write a letter. If fear whispers, listen. But above all, don't bolt the door shut. Leave a crack, a light on. Because love, even after 70, can still find its way to you. And when it does, when it does, may it come with the ease of someone who already knows what truly matters, and with the courage of someone who still believes in love. Because believing is always the first step to living. If this story touched you in any way, if at any moment you felt a lump in your throat, a warmth in your chest, or thought of someone, then leave a like, share what you felt in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. There are so many people out there needing to believe again, and stories like this might be the little crack they were waiting for.